Good morning. Welcome to our UK National Sunday service. My name is Benny Vitae and I'll be your MC today. So before we start the service, let's prepare our hearts and minds with prayer. So please join me in prayer. Good morning, Heavenly Parent. We're very grateful for this new day and that we can gather here together as Heavenly Parent Holy Community. Here watching this service, we have brothers and sisters from all walks of life, from all backgrounds and from all faiths. The beauty of our community is that we understand the dignity in our differences and that you created each of us with a unique purpose to play a different role in this world and to share some unique aspect of your voice with the world. And as we gather here as a community together today, let us recognize that and let us listen for your voice in the voices of others through all the different aspects of the service today, but also in the discussion groups later. We want to offer a special prayer for our world at this time where there are grave injustices happening around the world. We know that it pains your heart greatly to see these things, Heavenly Parent, and it's not your desire and it's not what you designed us for. You designed us to live in mutual respect and harmony with one another. But at the moment, we don't see that reality in our world. Ours is a fractured world. So today, as we gather together, we pray that you would use us, strengthen us, and fill us with your Holy Spirit and with your righteousness, so that we can be your ambassadors of justice and mercy in this fractured world. Please use us as your voice, as your vessels in these troubling times. As well as all the events happening on a global stage at the moment, we know that in our personal lives, for many of us, there are many challenges. It's a time of self-isolation, and we can very easily feel lonely. It's easy to feel lonely in these times where we can't see our friends as often as we'd like to. We can't see our loved ones and our family. And we miss one another. We miss seeing each other in person, not just virtually. But we know, Heavenly Parent, that even in our loneliness, you are there with us and you are present. Your eye is always over us. This week, let us remember that. I pray for all people in our community, for all of us who are struggling with loneliness, that you can be our companion. And that we can see that actually you're always holding our hands. Please be with us in this service today, and please speak through each person speaking today. And please guide everyone, wherever they are right now, anywhere in the UK, maybe even abroad. Please be with them in their homes. I want to offer this prayer now. So please hear our prayer. Arju. Okay, so we'll now start with our service. First up, we're going to have a worship song, and then after that we'll have a children's story, and then we'll have the European and Middle Eastern news. But first, let's join in worship.
I'm onward bound, Lord, let my are the Lord of sea and sky. I have heard my people cry. Oh, who dwell in dark and sin, my hand will save. I who made the stars of night, I will make their darkness bright. Who will bear my light to them? Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. I, the Lord of snow and rain, I have borne my people's pain. I have wept for love of them. They turn away. I will break their hearts of stone, give them hearts for love alone. I will speak my words to them. Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. And I will go, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. I will go, you lead me, Father, lead me. I will go, I will follow endlessly. Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart.
A Child's Garden, A Story of Hope by Michael Foreman. The boy saw it after a night of rain, a speck of green in the rubble, peeping up towards the sunlight. He moved some broken bricks so that nothing would fall and crush the tiny plant. He didn't know what sort of plant it was, a flower or a weed. He just knew it would struggle to survive. The boy searched around and found an old can which held a little rainwater. He brought it to the plant. "Drink up," he whispered, "drink up." The sun was climbing in the sky, and the boy gave the plant shade with some old sacking and wire. The boy's world was a place of ruin and rubble, ringed by a fence of barbed wire. In the hot, dry summer, the air was thick with dust. Faraway hills shimmered in the haze. The boy knew that cool streams flowed in those hills. He used to go there with his father, but now the hills were the wrong side of the wire. Over the following weeks, he cared for his secret garden. Soon the green tendrils reached to the high barbed wire fence. Now the boy could tell it was a vine, a grapevine. It spread along the fence and gave shade to its own tender roots, which in turn sent out more shoots. Birds and butterflies came bringing seeds and pollen on their wings. The garden grew. It was no longer a secret. Friends came to sit in its shade, and it became a playground for the children. Then one day soldiers came and destroyed everything. They threw the vine in a ditch on the other side of the wire. The boy thought his heart would break. Winter came. The boy and his family shivered in the cold and damp of their ruined home. Spring came late. After the first night of rain for weeks, the boy noticed green shoots all along the ditch. Some seeds from his vine must have survived the winter. He worried about the new shoots. He couldn't get close enough to water them. They were on the other side of the wire. Then, one evening, he saw a little girl playing by the ditch. She had a bucket and she was sprinkling water on the tiny plants. Each evening she returned. The boy hoped the soldiers wouldn't notice, but they didn't seem to mind plants growing on their side of the fence. Then one day a boy saw tiny specks of green peeping from the rubble where his garden had been. "Look," he yelled, "come and see, my vine has come back." He began collecting water and once more tended his garden. Soon it reached the wire where it became entwined with the green tendrils from the little girl's side. The barbed wire disappeared under leafy shade, and the new garden became home once more to birds and butterflies. "Let the soldiers return," thought the boy. "Roots are deep and seeds spread." One day the fence will disappear forever, and we will be able to walk again into the hills. The end.
Welcome to the European news. True Mother is praying for us all that we can all become filial sons and loyal patriots, and so we can be reported in the Chombo-won reports. On the foundation of her course, she was able to proclaim the day of the settlement of the Choninguk. And with that, she blessed heavily tribal Messiah as a Chombo families, finally opening the way for us to become perfected Choninguk citizens. We will open a new future, a heavily unified world, an ideal kingdom of heaven filled with joy and freedom. May we become faithful, devoted sons and daughters, and Chombo families who brings joy to heavenly parents.
여러분들의 신종적 메시아, 신은 새로운 신이 아닌 하나님을 모시는 종적 메시아들이 되어야 됩니다.
Now is coming the 58th celebration day of all true things, and Mr. Michael and Fumiko Balcom would like to invite each family to have a celebration in your own home. Please make a simple holy table with a place setting for true parents to show that in our hearts we want to welcome them just as much as before. Feel free to take a photograph together with your family and send it with a short greeting so that we can create a beautiful letter of appreciation to true parents. Now, let us hear some news from the southern region.
Hello, dear young leaders. I'm Sergio Vieira, representative UPF Portugal. I want to share with you some action plans for this year of 2020. And for this, we have our main project is character education. And we are making meetings and lectures on Saturdays with a multidisciplinary team to have a non-curricular use of the character education as pilot experience in schools and associations. We have the national project with our main national organizations, Family Federation and Women's Federation, cooperating with São Tomé. And for this, we want to help them find a second-hand car, donors for second-hand computers and sewing machines. We have two events in October, if possible, the conference on Mediterranean and CPLP issues, Community of Portuguese-speaking countries. Main partner will be Lusophone University, and the IAPD inauguration, main partner will be Hindu Community of Portugal. For this, we want also to make a Zoom forum with the main Portuguese religious leaders and Professor Paulo Mendes Pinto, a very known academic teacher in science of religions, and the person who knows very much these main religious leaders. We are cooperating with him to find and to make the best plan for this meeting. So that's all for now. Thank you very much and all the best.
Tungyil is a company that manufactures and sells natural health food supplements. With over 40 years' experience, we are the innovators in the market, striving to always produce the highest quality products that improve the lives of our users. Tungyil didn't start as an initiative from one of the Spanish Unification Church members. It was True Father's suggestion. During a meeting in Camberg, Germany, in the spring of 1975, True Father urged the leaders to start selling ginseng in their own countries. On the basis of that providential direction, Tungyil began its journey. Over the last 40 years of Tungyil's history, the company has seen considerable growth and development from a business perspective, however always maintaining at its core the vision given to it by True Father all those years ago. Tungyil now employs over 100 people with a state-of-the-art factory, manufacturing and selling over 140 products in countries all throughout Europe. With faith, determination and a command from heaven, we will continue moving forward on this providential path.
Hi everyone, here the news from Carp Italia. In this last period we kept organizing our meetings and events, and every Wednesday many young and old people gather together online to join us our topics. The last topics were about the spiritual world and its presence in our life, held by Pastor Angelo Chirulli. Another interesting theme was about the millennials and the digital influence, guided by Giuseppe Calì. One of our CARP members, Robin Chionna, gave us a talk about art and culture and their potential from a musician point of view. The collaboration with CARP Czech Republic is still going on, giving Europe feelings of unity and belonging. In all these meetings, join guests and members of all the ages. Carp Italia is now reachable on Facebook and our new page on Instagram, so follow us and keep the spirit high. Carp Italia! In Malta, the Sunday services are presently Zoom calls, as they all stay safe in their homes during the COVID lockdown. And welcome to a third-generation child born during the lockdown on March 15th to Altea and Jonathan Palombi Corlet.
Good afternoon from Portugal. We are bringing some updates from the month of May. So last month, our youth has been gathering weekly on Zoom to have group discussions and group sharings about certain topics. Some of the themes we went through were mental health, veganism, the future of our movement, how we can improve, and how we can do better as HARP and CARP. And also more recently discussed racism and some of the political issues and situations that are going on in the world right now. Last week we started attending the Sunday service again in our local church, but we decided to keep meeting on Zoom weekly to keep connected with our brothers and sisters that live too far away or that can't attend the Sunday services. That is all for today. Thank you very much.
Hi brothers and sisters. So last week True Mother spoke to Korean leaders and she mentioned that blessed families must become families who inherit True Parents course who have attended the Heavenly Parent on Earth. And this made me think of a couple of parents who work hard all their lives to build a fortune for their only child. And so they are committed, they make sacrifices, and they build up a fortune. And ultimately their lives reach an end and they naturally pass on, and the whole fortune is left in the hands of the only child. And the child could be wise, he could treasure the inheritance, he could build on it and pass on something bigger to the next generation. But the child could also be unwise, he could be a big spender, he could even lose the whole fortune in just one generation. So it's pretty much in the hands of the child. And if you think about it, if the child spends the whole fortune, it would be as if not only the child, but even as if the parents themselves had never lived. So this, I think True Mother knows it, and I think with these words she is encouraging us to think about this. What am I doing to inherit the course of True Parents? So with this question I would like to leave you. I would like to wish you a very nice week, and God bless you all.
I'm now delighted to introduce our speaker for today, Matthew Hewish, our Deputy National Leader in the UK community and pastor of the Bromley community, father of 9 with a 10th on the way. His topic today is team selection. So I'm sure he's got something very interesting to share with us today, and I'm personally very intrigued by that title. So let's have open ears and open hearts to receive what Matthew has to share with us today. So I'll now leave you with Matthew.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. The title of my message today is Team Selection. This week is an exciting week for football lovers around the country and indeed around the world, because the Premier League is returning. Teams will be playing behind closed doors without crowds in the stadia, but the rest of the world will be able to follow the games live or recorded. And it means that managers have to make their team selections. They have to decide which members of their squads have remained fit over the last few months. Maybe some of them are out of shape. Maybe some of them are actually in better shape than they were previously. Maybe they've recovered from injury, and so now is an opportunity to choose their best team. It's an interesting time, because with the last few months, all of the momentum that would have been gained, or indeed the bad form that perhaps some teams found themselves stuck in, all of that's in the past. In the remaining few fixtures that these teams have, there's a fresh opportunity. There are potential banana skins for some teams who thought that they were doing really well, and some potential get out of jail free cards for some of the clubs who can manage to find a good run of form at the moment. I'm also interested in picking a team, because I'm one of the millions of people around the world who participate in the fantasy football league. So in case many of you are not familiar with fantasy football, basically there is an app that you can download. You can go online and register, and you can create your own team. What you do is you have a fixed budget, £100 million or whatever the currency is, in order to buy a squad of players using that budget. And of course, you could buy lots of really expensive players who perform well week in, week out, but then you won't have so much money left to buy other players. So you need to carefully balance your team, thinking who are the players who will make my squad successful. And then each week, as the players play, if they score a goal, if they keep a clean sheet, if they assist in a goal, or perhaps if they get a yellow card or a red card or concede a penalty or save a penalty, all of these metrics are added up at the end of the game so that each player earns a score. And so if I have selected a certain squad with certain players in that squad, my team will get a certain score at the end of the weekend after all the fixtures have been played. Now, for a while, my wife was very confused about this. Why is Matthew interested in all of these other clubs that he doesn't actually support? And when the penny dropped that actually I had this fantasy football team made up of players representing other clubs, it suddenly made sense to her why I was so interested in all of these other clubs. So yeah, I'm one of those people who have a fantasy football team. I'm sure there are many of you watching this who maybe also enjoy participating in this harmless bit of fun. But it means that this week we have to make a team selection. We have to decide who we want in our team. Who do we think are going to score us the maximum number of points? And to get that balance right so that we don't spend too much of our resources getting 2 or 3 really valuable players and then many other not so valuable players who won't contribute much to the team. But we want to get the highest points per cost ratio or something like that in order to have the most successful team. Now, I don't think I'm one of the best players of fantasy football, but it's a bit of fun, as I said. But I remember when, I was a schoolboy, and in the school playground, it would be time for the 2 team captains, who are usually the best footballers, or the person who owned the ball. It got to be one of the team captains, and all the boys would line up, and the 2 captains would pick, I want him, I want him, I want him, and I'd be one of the last ones, one of the last people to be picked. Somewhat justifiably, but my football skills were never famous. They still are not. But I do enjoy playing every now and then. But sure, if you're not one of the best football players, it makes sense that the team captain, the team manager, will select those players who are gifted, who have the ability, but also can play well as part of a team. And okay, maybe football wasn't my game. Later on, it was rugby. I discovered that I had an interest in rugby. One day, my PE teacher just asked me, "Matthew, are you in the rugby team?" I said, "No, sir." "Right, go and talk to Mr. So-and-so and tell him that you want to join." "Yes, sir." And that's how I got involved in rugby. And, rugby, like football, is one of those team sports where everyone has a place to play. Especially in rugby, you can be big, you can be small, you can be slow, you can be fast, you can be good with your hands, you can be not so good with your hands. But there's always a position in which you could play, at least. And of course, the better you are, the better it is for the rest of the team. But it was interesting how in a rugby team of 15 players on the field at the time, every single one of them occupies a very specific role, a specific task. And, I was never going to be one of the fast backs. I was never very good at handling the ball, but I found my place in the forwards. I spent some time as a second row or as a prop in the front row, and I really enjoyed developing my athletic ability within that context. And it made me boost my confidence. It made me feel like, wow, I'm not such a unathletic person after all. I might not look very athletic, but actually, if I work hard, I can actually make a reasonable contribution. And so that was enlightening. Now, of course, I'm not just talking about sport. I'm using these analogies to reflect on the bigger things in life, that many times in life we might feel like we're part of some big cosmic team selection. And are we gifted and able? Are we going to be selected by the manager, by the captain, by the person in charge to perform an important role? Or are we going to be left behind? Or indeed, in the cosmic team that God is trying to assemble in order to perform a providential task, who is True Mother going to ask to do the specific jobs, to fulfill certain responsibilities? I'm sure all of us, as people of faith, because we have this relationship with God, because we have this strong sense of identity of who we are, not just in the present, but in the context of the past and the future. We are occupying a significant position in history. And so when we feel moved by God's love for us, we want to respond in a certain way. And so we might be asking ourselves, and we might be asking God, what is it that you want me to do? What have I been chosen to do? Where in the team is my place? And so that's what I want to reflect on today. I think it's important to recognize that not everybody can occupy the same role, first of all. That some people have a particular gift or a particular ability, and so they will be asked to be the striker in the football context, or to be the scrum half in the rugby context. But there are different roles, different jobs to perform, and different people will naturally perform different roles. And so I think there's a danger in making comparisons between myself and others. Specifically, I really want to reflect on this idea of what God is calling every single one of us to do in our providential team, in the team of faithful people, the team of faith, this community of faith who is trying to make a significant difference in the world. What is God calling us all to do? And so reflecting on what is my role in this providential drama, I want to caution against comparing myself to somebody else, comparing my results with someone else's results, comparing my natural gifts and abilities, my personality, my character, with someone else's. So how can we respond then? If we do have this deep desire to do something meaningful, to be a team player, we have this desire, I believe. We want to make a significant contribution. But what can we do? I want to draw to your attention, first of all, a quotation from the Divine Principle, which itself is a commentary on St. Paul's letter to the Romans. First of all, from St. Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 9, verse 21. Has the potter no right over the clay to make out of the same lump one vessel for beauty and another for menial use? And a commentary from the exposition of the Divine Principle, part 1, chapter 6, section 4. It has been explained that God gave human beings a portion of responsibility as the condition based on which he could love them more than any other being in creation. God's intention in giving this condition was to make them worthy to be the lords of creation by having them take after his creative nature. Yet, human beings themselves violated this condition and fell. They have become like refuse, fit to be discarded. In such a state, fallen people have no cause to complain, no matter how God may treat them. Do you find those words slightly startling? When I read them and reread them, I certainly found them a bit startling. First of all, in the Divine Principle commentary, there's this profound recognition that God has given this portion of responsibility to us human beings because God wants to love us the most, to give us the opportunity to earn the qualification, to be worthy of the fullness of God's love. That's very inspiring. That's the ideal. But then in the next sentence, it refers to how we human beings are so broken. We're like refuse, garbage, trash. We're rubbish. And so who are we to complain how God deals with each of us? Whoa, that's tough. Don't you feel that's a bit unfair? Don't you feel that's tough? But yet that is what St. Paul is saying in his letter to the Romans there. Doesn't God have the right with the same person to ask one person to do something profound and another person to do something reasonably ordinary? It's up to God. You know, this is coming from the predestination chapter. Now, of course, in the exposition of the Divine Principle, the whole predestination chapter is reflecting on the idea of how God's will is absolute. You know, God plans for all of us to experience goodness and blessing and love. But it's also reflecting on how the realization of God's will is conditional upon our fulfillment of our portion of responsibility. And we don't get to choose what our responsibility is in many ways. We can't choose where we were born. We can't choose what kind of lineage or family we come from. There are many aspects of our personality and character that we cannot choose, that they're just things that we've inherited, the circumstances around us which just were there. Now, of course, we can choose how to respond, and that is our responsibility, the ability to respond, the ability to answer to the circumstances in front of us, to the circumstances around us. We can't choose where we are or what the context is, but we can choose how to respond. So in this cosmic drama, where we are trying to find our part, first lesson there, we shouldn't complain. That's what the exposition of the divine principle is teaching us. We shouldn't complain. That's hard. It's easy to complain, and yet that is the Cain-type mentality. When you compare the brothers Cain and Abel, when they were asked to make their offering, and Cain's offering wasn't accepted, what did he do? He turned to God in anger. Didn't turn to God in humility and ask his brother Abel for help, or reflect on himself, what could he have done better? Instead, he complained. Instead, he found fault with God, basically. God, it's all wrong. God, it's all your fault. And that is the heart of complaint. So we should avoid complaining when we're trying to find our place. And maybe we see someone else who's occupying a position that we somewhat envy, or we're jealous of, or we think, oh, I'd fancy doing that, but I've never been given the opportunity to do that. Or maybe we've been asked to do something that we don't want to do. It's not fair. Why do I have to be the pastor or the national leader or whatever it is? Oops, did I just say that? It's not our job to complain. We should just humbly accept the circumstances we found ourselves in and embrace them, and think and reflect deeply on what is our responsibility. The second quotation I want to share with you is from a beautiful, unique passage in the exposition of the divine principle. Unique in that it uses the first person singular. This is from the introduction to part 2, section 3 in the exposition of the divine principle. As an individual, each one of us is a product of the history of the providence of restoration. Hence, the person who is to accomplish the purpose of history is none other than I, myself. I must take up the cross of history and accept responsibility to fulfill its calling. Wow, it's incredible how those words I, when we read them, make ourselves read it out. It's not just we're reading a book as if it was written by somebody else, but by reading out loud those words that say the word I'm saying that about myself. I am the person who has to take responsibility for history and respond to it. It then goes on to talk about how in this generation, horizontally, we have to restore everything that has been accumulated vertically. And the only way we can do that is by connecting with Christ at his second advent, that by becoming one in heart and mind and attending the Messiah, basically, that is how we learn the heart of God. And through that, we will be able to resolve all of these difficult, knotty situations by putting into practice the principles of restoration. And then the rest of the book, which is the vast majority of the book, is an exploration of biblical history and untangling these very powerful principles by which we can solve problems in the circumstances around us. Quite profound. But it starts with me. It starts with me. I can be a historical victor. I can be a participant in this team effort. I can be an actor in this historical drama. I just have to take responsibility. Now, for some of us, we have the circumstances and the ability to take a lot of responsibility. And so we should always be seeking to increase our sphere of responsibility. What more can we take responsibility for? And yet for some of us, actually taking responsibility for tribal messiahship seems like an impossible task when our own family is really struggling. that perhaps the first thing we need to take responsibility for is healing the pain within my own heart, healing the pain that exists in my relationships with my family members. And then in so doing, I will then unlock the potential for me to become a participant in a bigger team effort. And so my main takeaway that I want you to take from this message today is not to be afraid by the enormity of the scale of the project at hand. Because we're very idealistic people, we look at the whole world and we think, right, we want an ideal world, but am I going to do that? Well, that's terrifying. Or we look at the problems, even quite personal problems, which I think, I keep making the same mistakes over and over again. I cannot do this. Well, the simple truth is, by yourself, you can't. But with God, you can. Whose team are you on? Are you on your own as a solo prima donna, or are you on God's team? Because when you're playing for God's team, when God is your manager, results happen. And they might not happen straight away, and they might not happen the way that you imagined they would. But when you're playing for God's team, miracles can happen. So that's first of all, let's play on God's team. Let's make sure that we're getting selected into God's team and we're saying, God, pick me, not the other side. But then also, we see so many times in history that God chooses people who don't seem obvious as the best qualified candidates. Moses had a speech impediment. Gideon hid in a big bucket, basically. Many times in history, we see people whom God has called to do incredible things, but he doesn't necessarily call the qualified, he qualifies the called. So just being called is already a condition enough. Responding to that call is a condition through which God might be able to work through you and with you. And of course, you need to take your responsibility to make yourself a better person and more able, but trust that God can work through you. And so amazing things can happen. And I'm going to conclude directly speaking to the young members of our community, the teenagers of our community, because I want you to appreciate, I'm looking at you now. There were two teenagers especially who God called them to do a profound mission. One was a 15-year-old boy and the other was a 17-year-old girl. Some of you are in that age category. Of course, that 15-year-old boy, when God called him to do something profound, he said, no, not me. Who am I? I don't even live in a country. My country is under the occupation of a foreign empire. How am I supposed to do it? He rejected that invitation twice, but in the end he accepted that commission. Same with, that's true father. And then true mother, she accepted the commission to become a part of this team, to do something incredibly difficult, but she was willing to do it. She was called and she accepted that responsibility. And ever since, she has been trying her best to support God in the team effort of realizing God's kingdom. Now, some of us have a small job to perform, some of us have a big job to perform. And even those big jobs need to be broken down into smaller things that we can all manage, that we can all do. But it's important to remember, first of all, it's God's job. We're simply part of God's team working with God. And so any glory that we are able to bring, it all belongs to God. Of course, God would like to give us a pat on the back and say, well done, Matthew, well done, all of you. But let's not be too boastful about it. Let's be humble in recognizing that this is God's team effort. Coming back to the football analogy, I just want to remind you, in case some of you are familiar with this scene, when in 2016 in the European football tournament, Gareth Bale, the Real Madrid forward, scored a goal. And what did he do? He ran over to Chris Coleman, the Wales manager. He didn't celebrate by himself. He ran over to the manager to celebrate with him, knowing that this big team effort had been orchestrated by someone who actually wasn't on the pitch, an invisible force orchestrating things from the touchlines. Likewise, all the glory should belong to God. And so when we're part of this team, let's remember who is in charge and who is pulling all the strings behind the scenes. But then, what can we do practically? What are you going to do tomorrow morning? I want you to prayerfully reflect on what is a small thing that I can do today that I can take responsibility for some situation, perhaps in my own life, perhaps in my community, or perhaps even in the broader global scale, to reflect on what God is calling you to do, and then to think, what can I do next to take responsibility? I believe all of you are being called to be a part of God's team. Right now, there is a team selection taking place, and God is looking for people God can call upon to be our heavenly parents' filial children who can respond with the humility to search for God's feelings and God's strategy, and to align themselves with that and to perform a role that all together, all of those roles can intertwine to make something incredible happen. If you are thinking about your tribal messiahship, or your role in some national level ministry, or even your local community where maybe there are tensions taking place. I mean, I don't need to go into the details. There's a lot of tension taking place in society right now, locally and internationally. All of us can contribute in some way. And I invite you to prayerfully call on God to guide you in figuring out what is the role that God is selecting you to perform. I'd like to conclude this message with a short testimony of mine. I had a profound experience in 2003. I was a participant on the SDF training program, and we were in Korea. And I remember our dear Slovakian brother Julius giving some talk, inspiring everybody about the role that, in a sense, God and true parents were calling all of us young people to perform. And that was the first time where I really broke down in tears praying. We had a prayer immediately after that talk. And up until that point, I had had many experiences in which I really felt like I was the worst human being on the face of the earth. And yet, at the same time, I felt like, well, there's still hope because I can grow and there are many things I'm learning. But then when I was praying in Korea at that time, especially in response to that talk, I profoundly felt God telling me, Matthew, I know that you're not the ideal candidate. I know that you've got some issues that you're working on, but I really need you. I really need you to do something for your community, for your nation, even for your region. You know, we were a European SDF team, and I felt like being called to perform some special role for Europe. And, you know, many of us have had that kind of experience. I felt like God didn't really want to ask me because he knew it would be such a difficult, impossible request. But God had nobody else to ask. And that's the situation that the world finds itself often, that a situation is simply there and it needs somebody to respond to it, to do something. And who is going to be the one who responds? Who's going to be the one who takes responsibility? We can't just look around from side to side and expect somebody else to do it. Sometimes it just has to be you. And maybe you don't feel up for it. Maybe that's true. Maybe you don't have the qualifications, in which case maybe you do really need to just honestly take a step back or take a step to one side and wait for somebody else to do it. But if you do have the ability, or you can train yourself to develop the ability, then you can be the person who can take responsibility. Don't complain. Remember, don't complain about your current circumstances. Don't compare yourself with other situations, but just become someone who can take responsibility for yourself, for your family, for your community, even the nation and the world, and even take responsibility for healing the heart of God together with our true parents.
Hello, my name is Miho Fortune. I'm from the South London community, and please join me in benediction prayer. Our dearest beloved Heavenly Parent, thank you for this beautiful day that we could come together as a community and online and listen to a message from our brother Matthew Hewish. I pray that we can take these words into our hearts and apply them to our week and bring positivity and gratitude into our week, and that we can have the knowledge of your love for us as your children, that we can give that love to the people all around us. I pray that you can be with us and with our loved ones around the world, that especially those that are ill or unwell, that you can be with them, they can feel your love. We thank you for all the blessings that you give us in our lives and all of your love and investment. And we report this in our names. In my name, Miho and Alexander Blessed couple. Adieu.
Thank you everybody for joining us on this service. Before we finish, I want to mention that we're going to have fellowship and discussion over Zoom. So please join in that. But this week it will be split according to your different regions. So if you go to the YouTube description box below, you'll be able to find the appropriate discussion group for your region. But before we finish, I want to speak a blessing over all of you. This is the Aaronic blessing, which God told Moses to speak over Aaron and all the Israelites. So please receive this with an open heart. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. So I wish you all a blessed week, and I'm sending you much strength and encouragement from here in South London, wherever you are in your homes. And I hope to see you all soon in person again. Goodbye.